Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our next CTO Roundtable session. It's a beautiful day here in the Netherlands. It's still March, it's sunny, 22 degrees Celsius. That's a unique situation. I guess it will rain during the weekend again. With that said, I'm sure that the CTO Roundtable is going to be very interesting today. We have a very diverse panel and also a very diverse group of viewers. I don't think we have ever had such so many countries represented as we have today. So I hope you all will enjoy, I'm sure I will, with this interesting topic and panel. So today we're going to discuss what the differences are between durable teams and initiative-based teams, the impact that it has on developers, satisfaction, effectiveness, etc. If you're coming to hear a technical story, I'm really sorry. Today is all about people and process. So let's start. Good. So we have an international panel today. We have Frank van den Brink. Frank is based in the Netherlands and he consults companies how to improve their development processes. He currently does that as the Global Development Manager at Medi Capital Rent. Good afternoon, Frank. The second panel member is Remy Theyaerts. Remy is the CTO at Fiber and based in the UK. So good afternoon, Remy. And last but not least, Sriram Narayan. Sriram is an independent consultant and vice president advisory at ThoughtWorks. And Sriram is also the author of a book on the topic of this roundtable, so Agile IT Organization Design. His book was featured as a must-read for CEOs by the Enterprisers Project, which is a joint initiative of Harvard Business Review and Red Hat. Sriram is based in India, and good evening for you, Sriram. Good. So I'm Gerbert Oude Velthuis. I'm the general manager of the software house in the Netherlands and the CTO of Traffalia, and I will be your host today. So let me stop share so that we can see our panel a little bit better. Okay. So let's get to know our panel a little bit better first. So Remy, can you start with giving us a short introduction about yourself and Fiber?
Sure. Hi, I'm Remy. So I'm a computer scientist by trade. I am the CTO of Fiber. I also co-founded the company that Fiber was before that. So I lead a tech team. Fiber is it's a lender in the UK. We lend to small and medium businesses, and we try to do that better and cheaper than competitors in the market using technology. So we like to think ourselves as a tech fin rather than a fintech. Yeah. We're more focused on technology or we try to build the right technology for finance. So yeah.
Okay, need to remember that tech fin. Frank, can you explain in a few sentences how you help your clients, what you do?
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Frank. I'm a software development consultant. Basically, what I do is I assist companies that are struggling with growth around software development. So I do assessments, coaching to make sure that they can produce high quality software at an appropriate pace. And how exactly I help them very much depends on the clients and what they are doing exactly.
Sure.
So I adapt my approach to each company.
Very good, very good. Okay. And Sriram, same question to you. What keeps you busy on a daily basis, I would say?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Gerbert, for the introduction earlier. I work as an advisory consultant. I help clients improve the performance of their organizations. Often this is in the context of their digital or agile transformation initiatives. And prior to this, I've been in the industry for about 22 years, mostly in consulting. But I've also worked for a couple of years in a product team at ThoughtWorks for a product called GoCD. And along the way, I've been a developer, software architect, director of innovation, a market-facing product owner, head of technology. So a jack of a lot of roles. But last few years, ever since the book came out, I have been advising clients to help improve the performance of their organizations. So look forward to the session. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for being here. So some housekeeping. So we really like to get as many questions as possible. Take use of this panel. So just type the question in the question tab, and I will discuss it with the panel. When there are questions that we cannot address during the session, we'll try to get back to you later. So, okay, let's start with setting a baseline. So as well, use the same definition of initiative-based teams and durable teams. So Sriram, I can ask you to give a short definition of initiative-based teams and durable teams, as you call it in your book, teams that work in product mode.
Sure. Yeah, we talk about teams that operate in product mode, and in this session we are going to use the term durable teams to mean pretty much the same thing. And so we define those kind of teams as teams that are empowered to change course as long as they're solving the problem that they've taken up, that are outcome oriented, outcome as in the outcome being solving the problem that they are assigned, as opposed to just delivering some functionality.
Business outcome, I guess, more than
sorry,
the business outcome more. Yes. Yeah.
And therefore they need to be business aligned or domain aligned rather than technology aligned or technology component aligned. They need to be long lived. So unlike project teams which last for a few months or a year, these type of teams typically last for several years. Cross-functional, so different roles part of the same team, ideally all roles required to solve the problem. So whether it's designers, developers, analysts, data scientists, all kinds of roles that are required. It might not be feasible to have all of them as full-time dedicated members, but that is as far as possible we try to make it so. They ideate, build, and run teams. So they are not just building something and handing it over to somebody. They're actually ideating about how to solve the problem, building it, running it, and learning from that feedback, and then ideating again. And so, in broadly, they're expected to solve problems and improve business outcomes rather than just deliver functionality on schedule. And that is in contrast with what we call as initiative teams or project teams, which typically, there is no reason why they cannot also try to be a little bit like this. But typically what we have seen is that they are temporary teams that are mostly, tasked with the delivery. Their responsibility is delivery. So they are expected to deliver some functionality by a certain date.
Yeah. So outcome driven is an important one, long lived, but especially also responsible for run, etc. So yeah. Okay, good, thank you. So Remy, can you describe the setup of your team at Fiverr, or teams it is at Fiverr?
Sure. So within the company, we have a bunch of, departments. We have the operational team, the risk team, the technology team, or engineering team, however you like to call them. And then within the technology teams, we have what we call development squads. Each squad is, for intents and purposes, independent from each other. So they have their own schedule, they run their own, their own processes. And then within each squad, you have some FTEs and you have some additional people that are supplemented in. And so these people come most of the time from the software house. And so the reason we do this is these FTEs are, I guess, the long-lived part of the team, the guys that will keep the know-how of the domain that the squad is focused on, and then the temporary people, or the guys who are not employed directly by Fiverr, move in and out as it comes. And so by having a setup like this, the idea was, when we started doing this, to be cost efficient, but to keep also the continuity across each team. So that's how we're set up today.
Yeah. So it's if I summarize, it's more a mix between initiative driven and durable.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid between the two. I guess it's somewhat the result of growing really fast. To give you an idea, we went from 7 employees to around 35 or something like that within 3 months. You can have the best HR department in the world. They can't hire that many people so quickly, or you're an HR company. But so the software house, the software house came in as like this buffer, if you want, to fill in these positions, and then evolved in, we really like the way it works today, where we have some permanent people that keep the knowledge within the company, and some hybrid that come in and out.
Okay, very good, thank you. So Frank, I understand you said you're doing these assessments with companies and then help them to improve, sort of as a change manager, I guess. So what is it that you see that companies tend towards, initiative driven or durable teams?
Well, I think it really depends on the company and what they're working on. So if I work for a lot of companies that are SaaS companies or product-based companies, and they obviously tend to run product-based teams, so more durable teams that independently can make decisions. It really depends. It really depends. I've seen in bigger companies where they tend to have a mix, so product-based teams, and then have certain task forces or initiative-based teams to go through certain improvements or make specific changes. But it really depends on the context, really.
Okay, interesting, thank you. So I would be interested to see what team setup the viewers have. So let's do a quick poll. You should see the poll appearing on your screen now. So do you work with initiative-based teams or durable teams? And then you click one, submit, and then let's see if the answers coming in, and then we should see the results soon. Okay. There they are. Okay, a mix of both. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
I thought I had a special idea, but it seems like not really.
Yeah. So Sriram, anything? Are you surprised by this, or did you expect this?
No, this makes a lot of sense, because it only makes sense to have long-lived teams if you're chasing long-lived problems. And in most organizations, you have a mix of problems. So some things are a one-time fix, and for a one-time fix, a temporary team works very well. Yeah, it makes sense.
Makes sense. Okay, very good. So we as a software house, we strongly believe in a durable team setup, and we prefer not just to deliver developers that do a project and then leave, etc., but more a team setup, with several resources, different views on it, development, QA, cloud engineers, designers, etc. We see that funding a dedicated team gives more flexibility, efficiency, that way of working. We also see that developers want to do new stuff all the time, a lot of new stuff. And if they then become responsible for run, that's there's a tension in that. How do you see that, Sriram?
You mean the tension? Sorry, can you like?
No, so the question is more, what is the effect of that for the developers? Some positives, some negatives of a durable team. Because what we see is that the developers very often want to do new stuff, and rather not be responsible for run sometimes.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, let me share something from my personal experience when I was part of a product team several years ago, and mostly that has been corroborated by clients later. So I was part of this team called GoCD, which is a tool that helps with continuous delivery. It allows you to create build pipelines and deployment pipelines and so on. And I was part of this team for most of 2012 and 13. And it was a classic software product that we were selling in the market. So it was organized as a product team. Although it's not always necessary. I have examples of organizations that develop products using projects. So, but this was a classic product team, and my experience was that being part of a team for 2 years like this, it leads to much better team dynamics. Like I was able to, as a team, we were bonding much better. We understood each other's personalities much better, each other's strengths and weaknesses much better. It also allowed us to go deeper into technology. Sometimes, on projects, you build some stuff, you don't stick around long enough to see how well it performs in production. That becomes the job of a support team or something. But here you're there for the whole life cycle. So, and I guess also because of the nature of the product that we were building, I got a lot of opportunity to go deep into the technology. Yeah, I mean, dealing with support tickets, at that time, for example, it gives you better perspective as a developer. So, for example, as a developer, and ThoughtWorks has always pioneered agile ways of working. So we used to be big champions of, say, test-driven development and actually driving the test with these tools. So I remember we used to use this tool called IntelliJ because the backend was Java and the front end was Rails-based front end. And as part of that, when you're writing the test and then driving the code from that test, you do a lot of debugging to debug your unit tests in the development environment. You don't really need to write log statements. They don't help you while developing. But then when you deal with support tickets and you realize that, oh, I haven't put any log statements here, or the right log levels or log categories, for example, then I begin to realize, oh, how hard it is to deal with production support in these kind of cases. So there is a lot of learnings when you're part of a team that builds and runs, is responsible for the run as well. And perhaps the biggest is that seeing the impact of the work on customers, on the performance of the product, and learning the opportunity to learn from that impact and tie that back into teams. There are, of course, negatives as well. Sometimes the side effect of such a strong team bonding is that you might feel a little cut off from other teams, and you are often sometimes cut off from other teams. There might be, that people might. So we had a suite of products, and the collaboration between the product teams was, there was room for improvement on that front. But then we also, and of course, developers can sometimes feel bored. Those who are want variety and they want to do something for 6 months and move to something else. They want variety. We had a rule of a 18-month rotation rule, which even otherwise, when you're in professional services, your clients don't want your developers to move around every 6 months, right? But just when they have built some knowledge about their systems. So that rule works whether you're doing services or whether you're doing products. The 18-month rule helps us to deal with that.
That's interesting. 18 months. Yeah. Frank, anything to add to that? Does this align with your experience?
Yeah, it does. I don't think necessarily that developers are always looking for new features to make. I think it's a bit more, nuanced than that. I think what developers want is obviously work on challenging things. And if you work in a team that's working on a product for quite a while, and you also have to deal with the effects of your work in production and support, it should allow you to produce much higher quality software, which would allow you to dive deeper into technology or explore features in a different way than just moving from one project to the other. So it's not necessarily that just because you work on one thing for a long time, you don't work on anything new. Actually, it's exactly like what I very much agree with what Sriram said, is that if you're so attuned to each other and you're so deep into this product, you can really explore areas that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, which could be a challenge in and of itself.
No, correct. So, putting something black and white, I know.
The support ticket, the support ticket that you guys mentioned is interesting. We use our support tickets as almost a way for people to learn the platform. We've got an on-call rotation whereby we're pretty small platform. We don't have and we don't do support tickets customer facing, so it's only internal facing with our operational team. So we don't get 200 requests a day. We get on a bad day we get 7, 8, 10 requests maybe, something not going right. But so what we do is we have an on-call rotation where every day another dev is on call, and he acts as a triage agent almost. But so what that means is really when they are on call, they are really exposed to the whole everything within the technology department. Sometimes it's not even development related. Sometimes it's SaaS tools that we use or whatever that go wrong. And so we almost use that as a way for them to learn the system and for them to get more familiar with everything that we're using. And so I guess it's an adaptation to you build, you maintain. It's sort of you build, you maintain, but somebody else will triage it to you if you build it, sort of thing. So it's interesting.
Indeed, and so you have this, Remy, you have this combined team of long-term employees and a flexible layer of developers and other people, etc. So how do you make sure that they all feel one team and work on those tickets that you were saying, and how do you any special tricks there?
Not really. It's a complicated problem. I think it's a matter of involving even the flexible layer, I guess, in technology decisions rather than the teams are not consciously divided. So there is no, some meetings are attended by FTEs, some meetings are attended by flexible. That's not how it works. They are one team, and it's just that the flexible team sometimes they move around the flexible side of the team. So we really we follow all the same, I guess, the methodology that we would do if it was a permanent team. So we try to do the same. I mean, we try to do, we do retros and we do all of that with everybody in the team included. We don't make a differentiation between the two. It's just, I guess, more an admin differentiation and a management differentiation, like how we deal with employees.
Very good. Thank you. Makes sense. So, and it's really good to see how integrated teams are based on the Christmas gifts. If they get the same Christmas gift, etc., as the same employees, that's really a signal.
Yeah, we do, for example, something we call campaigns, where, again, because we're pretty small and we're moving very fast, we as a management, we try to foresee 6 weeks in advance what the company is going to work on. And then at the end of each campaign, we do what we call a campaign hero, where one or two, actually it's 2 people are voted by popular vote, who really demonstrated the values of the company during that campaign. And we do that for everybody, FTEs or the flexible layer. So anybody is eligible to be voted, sort of thing. It actually turns out that in the last 2 campaigns, I think, it was people from the flexible layer that got voted campaign hero over FTEs. So I guess it's working somehow.
I have a similar experience at companies I worked at that have a flexible layer. We always did a very similar thing. So they are seen as full team members, and we don't really treat them differently as anybody else. And I think it's very important for the team dynamic to do that. It would be a bit strange if you exclude them in some way.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good, very good. Another side to it. So one of our clients who works in e-commerce has a large group of developers, and they have one team that's fully responsible for the shopping cart. You know, that's one simple, really important piece of the e-commerce side. They have 20 developers only working on that shopping cart. I can imagine that developers might find it sometimes boring to find such a limited scope of the work. How do you see that in durable teams? And is that something that is different with initiative and based teams and durable teams, Sriram? How do you see that?
I mean, usually the area is when we're talking about durable teams or teams operating in product mode, the area that they are responsible for is broad enough. It's, rather, I mean, you gave the example of shopping cart. I would say, shopping cart is probably far if I were modeling it, I would call it, I will give them more responsibility and say it's maybe, I don't know, it's the conversion journey, or, or maybe it's part of the order management team. Because when we're talking about product mode teams or durable teams, it's not the same as feature teams. Because feature teams are much narrower in scope. They focus on one feature at a time. But these teams, durable teams, it only makes sense even from a business point of view to fund a team like this for multiple years if they are responsible for a big enough area in which you can expect that there will be some or the other demand for functionality all the time. Otherwise, it gets too narrow, and you have to keep shuffling people between teams.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like the fact how you link it to a business outcome. They're responsible for the conversion instead of the shopping cart, and of course, it's the shopping cart in the end, but it gives them a bigger responsibility and bigger thing to work on. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's also you've got to look at it as it's the same. It's like when you have a car, if you replace all the parts in the car, is it still the same car? Same scenario here. That you've got a team that's responsible for your shopping cart. When do you think that this team is not the same? Is not the same team that it was 6 months ago when all the members have changed? It's quite rare that you replace everybody in the team in one go. You have one person leaving, another one coming in, another person leaving, another one coming in. So really, if you don't look at a team as individual members, but you rather look at it as an object, for lack of a better term, you could have, I don't know, it becomes you could have durable teams with members that move in and out, sort of thing.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And Frank, how much, if you have different clients, so it's different experiences, I'm sure, and different setups, but in general speaking, how much autonomy do you provide to development teams? Would you prefer setting up them with a supervisor, or are they really autonomous, etc.?
Well, it depends on the maturity of the team. It depends on what they're working on. Ideally, what you'd want is, of course, a fully autonomous team with a clear goal and a clear purpose that is able to independently make decisions to achieve that goal. But sometimes that's not viable, either due to maturity or lack of expertise, or things surrounding the team that inhibits them in some way, and then you might need a little bit more guidance there. But ideally, I prefer having fully autonomous teams, as autonomous as is responsible.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And Remy, how do you see this? Who decides technology? Which technology to use? Is that as in you, or?
No. Yeah, I agree. I think it depends on the maturity. We are right in the middle of that journey of trying to make our 3 squads more independent from each other. because we were very small before. We only had one team, and therefore, everybody was involved everywhere. It's very difficult to move. Well, it's very difficult. It's a long journey to move to competing independent team. If you've been in a model before where you didn't have that. I think choosing technologies is a challenging one, because you also don't want to end up with a zoo where you have one team coding in, I don't know, in JavaScript and the other one coding in Go, and then those two systems need to interact somehow, and then you indeed can't move people around because one person might not know Go and the other one might not know JavaScript, and then people really get siloed into their own thing. So I think you need to. My personal opinion is there needs to be somewhat a layer on top that brings some sort of harmony across all the teams that makes maybe the larger decisions, and then you get the teams to make smaller decisions or things that might not impact the wider organization. But
it's a mix, right?
Yeah, it's a mix. If you let all teams decide everything themselves, you end up with something that's unmaintainable.
I think also it's like that's where the maturity comes in as well, because I think that especially a team that's very autonomous is also business aware. So it is aware that, we could go, the whole company is using JavaScript or Java, and we could go for this entirely different technology, but the benefits don't weigh up against the cost, and they should be able to make a smart decision there without somebody telling them that they can't do that. And they should be able to make a good case for using the technology if it does weigh up to going away from the standard.
Yeah.
So Sriram, the question from Daniel here. If you have a large number of product teams, durable teams that are empowered, autonomous, how would you run then a large initiative projects that span multiple products? He gives an example that runs across 10 products for an extended time.
Right. Well, to some extent, this is not different from even without product teams. How would you do it, right? If you're talking about 10 product teams, even otherwise, you would need in the classic model, you would need a program, and you would need a program organization, and you would need several individual teams, right? And you would coordinate the work between those teams. So here, what would happen is instead of it's a little bit instead of doing all that coordination at runtime, what you would do is you would get into a solutioning phase where you kind of say, okay, this is the cross-cutting initiative that we are going to work on, and broadly this is the shape of the solution, and you basically say, okay, you carve it out into pieces and say, okay, this part is the responsibility of team A, and this part is the responsibility of team B, etc. And basically those items, so if at that level, if you're talking about epics, features, and stories, right, then for a cross-cutting initiative like this, you at the level of epics, you say, okay, these epics belong to team A and these epics belong to team B, etc. And draw out the dependencies, who needs to get done first before the other team can begin. And at that point, those things just become additional items onto their individual roadmaps, right? With a common understanding of the priorities, right? So for cross-cutting initiatives, I recommend that in addition to the individual product owners on the individual squads, or whatever you want to call those teams, there needs to be a solution owner who has the end-to-end perspective of the solution, but who can then coordinate with the individual product owners. But that's a little bit of a lightweight coordination, just to ensure that everybody has the same idea of prioritization and dependencies and so on. And if you have to make any on-the-spot calls regarding the scope of the solution, okay, we thought we are going to deliver this level of solution by this date, but now there are some unforeseen circumstances, so we have to maybe deliver a slightly lower level of solution. To make those kind of calls, it's useful to have a cross-cutting solution owner in such cases.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Anything to add, Franco, already?
No, I think there's a few organizations like startups in the UK that work like this. So they've got I guess they're not so the development teams are not so much business aware, they're more domain aware. So they focus on one part of the user journey or something. And then you have product teams that are I guess to Sriram's point, feature owners. And so the product teams would compete for the development resources, I guess. But so the product team is not embedded within the development team. You'd have to give an example, you'd have a dev team focused on, I don't know, user onboarding, and then another dev team focused on user checkout. And then I want to create a new feature where I'd like to be able to speed up the onboarding so that I can skip a step in the checkout process. And so me sitting in that product team would have to coordinate with the two development teams one by one to get my feature out. That I think it's Revolut in the UK that works like this. And so product team are not within product people, I guess, are not within the development teams.
Okay. Yeah, it's another setup again. So
yeah.
We all love real life examples. So do you have a good example where Sriram, where a durable team really made a difference?
Sure. So one of our earliest clients that I know of who adopted this way of working was the train line, which is a ticketing, a rail ticketing. It used to be. I mean, I'm sure they've grown in stature since then. But there is still, there's still. If you go to the trainline.com, you can book railway tickets for pretty much anywhere in the UK. They had two lines of businesses. They had a direct to customer line of business, and they had a different line of business where they were basically providing the ticketing platform for 25 to 26 different train operating companies in the UK. Around that time frame, 2011-12 time frame, they were one of the early movers in this space. The direct to consumer line of business decided to reorganize themselves in this fashion as product teams, and they organized themselves as they divided the customer journey. You land on the website, you search for tickets, then you're presented with a matrix of options. You choose a ticket, you choose the delivery options, whether you want it delivered by mail, or you're going to collect the ticket from a token from a kiosk. And there are some add-ons like, do you want to bring a bicycle onto the train, and so on. So there was the whole journey, and they divided the teams based on the journey. So there was a search team and a journey options team and so on. And in terms of so then the question arises, okay, now how can we make these teams outcome oriented, right? Because they had one particular outcome that they used to monitor, which they used to call as the look to book ratio, which means how many people come looking for tickets and how many of them actually end up booking tickets through this website, right? Yeah. It's basically a conversion metric, and that was a high level metric. But when you have teams organized like this, the question arises, like, how do no single team can be made responsible for the whole of the look to book ratio, because they are each responsible for different stages of the customer journey. And so they ended up dividing that overall conversion metric into sub metrics for parts of the journey. So they had like a search conversion, a cart conversion, a checkout conversion, and so on. And that's how those individual teams were able to be outcome oriented, at the same time, be able to function as independent product teams, because this was a fairly significant application landscape underneath. So even though I say, search team and journey options team, etc., each team was looking after 6 or 7 subsystems, so it was, it worked out quite well for them.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Especially if those outcomes work together to conversion in the end, of course. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. So Frank, can you provide an example of a situation where either initiative-based team or a durable team really make difference? So how you set it up, a real life example?
Yeah, well, I think like what's maybe more interesting is how it doesn't work, which is when
sure. War story.
No, I think like the biggest mistake is when there's a misalignment between what a team is responsible for and the actual business outcomes. So I've worked for a company where they had they basically made how do I put this? They basically made custom applications, and at the core of it there was a fixed platform that with some shared services that serviced all these applications, and the idea was to have this core system as a product, and have the team responsible for the longevity of the product and the continued development of it, and the success, the business outcomes of the product. The thing was so that they had separate teams that would do the actual implementation on the customer side, and these teams they would be dealing with all the effects of the decisions being made by the product team. So they would be dealing with support, they would be dealing with implementation issues, and you would clearly see this mismatch between the effects and the decisions being made. So what you had was that the product team had a roadmap, and they thought, well, this is the direction. These are sound decisions. This is what we should do. High quality, and this is our purpose. And then you had basically the implementation teams and support teams. They would be dealing with all the fallout of those decisions, because the product team, and not because they made necessarily bad decisions, but because they were disconnected from the impact of their decisions. So they didn't truly see what it meant for their customers. They didn't see what it meant for the teams implementing it and dealing with the support, and it resulted in very high maintenance load. It resulted in the product taking a direction which might not necessarily be the direction it should be in. And I think that's when you can really see, and it's not necessarily then the approach that they take that's wrong, but it's just the organization of responsibilities and
common goals and things.
Yeah, and the common goals that they share.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good example. Thank you. Looking at the time, and okay. So let's talk a little bit about growth opportunities and things like that. So. Remy, can you talk about how you work at Fiverr with people's career path and provide growth opportunities and promotions and things like that?
Yeah. So again, this is an interesting one, because obviously we don't do well. We work closely with the software house on I guess what the non-FTE people, what opportunity do they have is one of the reasons that we chose the software house to work with as a partner, is because you guys are very focused on developing the skills of the devs as part of within your own company. And so often I have conversations with our project manager on what skills are the guys missing, what can they work on, and you guys work with your HR department on that on your side. We do a very similar thing on our side with our FTEs, I guess. And so what we do is we have quarterly reviews with them, one-on-one with the direct line manager, and they set at the beginning of each calendar year, they said that each FTE sets themselves 3 goals. These could be anything they want, so it doesn't have to be work related. I mean, some of them are around developing the soft skills. Like, it could really be whatever they want. And then the direct line manager does everything they can to help them reach that goal by the end of the year. So we have a budget for education, for training. We've paid for AWS certifications for some of our guys. We really try. The direct line manager tries to empowers each FTE to reach their personal goal for the year. In terms of promotions, we don't really do titles. So everybody's got the same title, and I guess except if you're C-level, but everything on the net is pretty much all the same. So we don't really do like, oh, you're now, I don't know, a junior dev or a senior dev, or like, we don't really do that. For us, it's all the same. And in terms of promotion, it's or like salary increase or stuff like that, it's really discretionary, but we have a strong, I guess, bonus structure where people get rewarded according to their work, but also according to how the company does overall. It's a mix of both. So rather than being completely according to what your manager thinks of you, it's also driven by how well the company is doing as a whole, and we're very transparent to everybody on how well the company does. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So Sriram, do you see that different in durable teams? I can imagine that sometimes you might think, if you look from the outside to a durable team, that there is a ceiling. Eh? So what is it? What's my next step? I'm in this team. Going to a next team might be a lateral step. How do you see that in durable teams?
In my experience, I haven't seen it being very different from let's say, for example, the project's way of working, because most organizations that make this transition, they don't actually change reporting lines in that process, or they don't necessarily change their existing set of job levels and titles and so on. So, for example, developers and other specialists, what are the typical growth career paths, right? You can either grow into a core technical track, so where you do have levels. You can say you're a senior developer, a lead developer, a principal, or a distinguished engineer, or a fellow. Even in some companies have these kind of things for the technical track. On the manager track, you can grow into becoming an engineering manager, a director of engineering, a VP, and onto the C levels, right? Or you can a lot of organizations do provide facility to switch tracks. I mean, I am a great example of switching tracks, because I switched from professional services to products. And when I switched to products, at that moment, there was only opening for a developer role. So I went into products as a developer, but then moved on to becoming a market-facing product owner for GoCD, which then gave me ideas about how other clients are organized. And, it started giving me ideas about org design, and which is how I ended up, doing the kind of work that I now do. So yeah, this is not a great example of maybe vertical growth, but I have certainly enjoyed that diverse roles that I have played and have grown in perspective. Yeah, I mean, I've had some degree of vertical growth as well. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So no big difference in that sense. And I'm going to skip a few questions here because of time, and going to an intriguing question. So Remy, imagine you're starting a new startup. You just got funded, so money is not an issue, and need to deliver results fast. How would you set up your development teams?
I guess it depends what the problem is. If it's a very deep technical problem that requires a lot of research and that sort of stuff, if it's not only about implementation, I will be more for hiring a durable team and building, not hiring, building a durable team and getting the guys to stay on for a long term. If it's more about delivering features that are not too technically difficult, and it's just about going fast, I would go with what we have, similar than what we have today, where you have a mix of both. I worked at IoT companies before where we were doing very low energy transfers, like data transfers for IoT devices, and that's a very deep technical problem. It's not something that you can just come in, solve, and then leave. And you couldn't do that with a project team, or you'd have, well, you could, but it wouldn't be. I don't think it would be healthy. If it's about building more something like fiber, where the technology piece of fiber is not super challenging. It has its challenges, but it's not a deep technical problem. I think the challenge is more in the domain, I guess, on having domain knowledge, than having a model like us where you have a domain owner and you have flexible teams that are underneath that and solve the features as they come along. I think that's a good scenario.
Yeah,
that's how we do it.
Thank you. So Frank, similar question for you, but you're a little bit further. So your product is becoming a success and you're funded and you just hired your 30 person, so you're going from startup to scale up, I would say. How would you set up your teams?
Well, I hope with the 30th person it won't be that much different as from the 29th, but I think it depends really. It depends. I very much believe that like you can't just come up with some sort of master plan and just plan out your teams and put everything in there and just have it work. I very much believe that it should be, especially with a company that's growing, it should be an organic process, and you should be pragmatic, and you should be very much attuned to the latest insights and of your own business and the actual needs of today, and then shape your teams around that. So I don't think you can really say that a company of 30 people should be structured like this. It really depends on what they're working on and the history and what technology they're focused on, or is it more like consumer facing product, or is it it's so many variables you can't really say.
Yeah, okay, makes sense, but it's
not the answer.
Yeah, there's always
it's the famous consultant answer. It depends.
It depends. So Sriram, I'm going to try it again. Maybe.
One last time.
So a common setup in larger companies is that they run initiative after initiative after initiative, have a resource pool, maybe along with some product teams, but very often one big resource pool. They have a project management office, a PMO, and to manage those initiatives, and have business case process to fund them, etc. What would, in more general terms, what would you advise them?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I would advise them that if it's all working great for you, if your business is doing great and everything is great, there's no need to change, right? I mean, just continue whatever works for you. Great, yeah. But often, I mean, what people have been seeing, why this topic came up and became popular, is that people have been seeing that in those kind of organizations, it takes 6 months to 1 year from to just get a project up and running, because you have to make the case for it. There is feasibility study, there is business case analysis, there is the annual budgeting cycle where there are projects competing for budget and so on. So it takes so in that situation they are not able to respond quickly to demands of the market, or if they are and that has become ever since the phrase became popular that software is eating the world. Since that time, people have been realizing that we need to be able to respond quickly to feedback to the market, and this existing way of working is not helping with that. And it's also because if you look at why this existing way of working came into being, it's because 20 years ago, IT was purely seen as a cost center, and you wanted to manage it in such a way that you want to design to optimize cost. You did not design to optimize speed, right? And so it was designed that I'll have a pool of talent, right? And so it's like for people who are familiar with the technical side of things, it's like database connection pooling or anything like that, right? You have a pool and you can quickly allocate as and when you need something, and then return it back to the pool. From a resource utilization point of view, that is the best design, right? But today the demand of the business is not resource optimization, it's speed to market. So now if you want to optimize for a different thing, then you have to think about the design differently.
Yeah, makes a lot. Thank you. So the time is getting going fast. So we're almost at top of the hour again. So before we go to the question from the audience, we've got a few. We'd like to talk about the CTO Roundtable sessions. So we're organizing them every 6 weeks, and we rotate the panel based on the topic. So if you have a topic that you would like to see next time, just put it in the chat window, send me an email. Also, if you want to contact or contract, I would say Sriram or Frank, just contact me. I will make the connections for you. With that kind of knowledge, I'm sure there will be interest. So good, enough commercials. Let's move to the questions from the audience. I think I can squeeze in a few. So if you have, Catherine is asking, if you have multiple teams working with the same infrastructure, what's the approach to manage it? A dedicated team or an embedded DevOps team? Who wants to say something? Frank?
I guess it depends. Well, I've seen both work well. So I think the question is more about ownership. So you want a clear division of ownership. So ideally, you would want your teams to be able to make decisions that impact the success of their product, right? And if those decisions are related to infrastructure, they should be able to make those decisions. So if they need different infrastructure or they need different things to be set up differently, they should be able to do that. And as soon as they are not able to do that independently and they have to work with other teams or they have to align with other teams, then there's a cost associated to that. Now, what I've seen work very well is sort of a shared services team. So if you have a lot of teams working on the same infrastructure and you can clearly divide what runs on the infrastructure versus the infrastructure itself. So if you think about like Kubernetes or containers or something similar, then there's a clear division there, and you can very clearly define those responsibilities, and that works well, I think. I do think you do want some DevOps in the teams to make sure that there is at least the expertise there to do support and do infrastructure maintenance. Yeah. And also work with the shared service team to make those changes. What doesn't work is having multiple teams deploy their stuff on the same, really the same infrastructure. So they have to manage the same servers. They have a shared responsibility of keeping it up to date. They have a shared responsibility with making sure it doesn't go down. And this might work to some extent if you have a couple of teams, but the more teams you have and the more this responsibility is shared, the more difficult it becomes to get a setup that really works and that's high quality, well maintained and focused in its purpose.
Thank you, and it's almost 4 o'clock, so I have a few more questions, but I will answer them later. Then, thank you, Remy, for being here. Sriram, thank you, and Frank, thank you for the insights were very valuable, and I believe this was very interesting discussion. As we're still, unfortunately, cannot physically give you a gift, I sent you a gift to your inbox. You should have received it a few minutes ago. Hope you enjoy it, and let's build some durable teams here. So with this, we end the CTO Roundtable session and hope to see you all next time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.